Hi, it's Alexander Russo from The Grade. This is the Education Show, and how exciting to be here today with AP's Sharon Luria. Sharon, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
We are here to talk about, among other things, what's going on in Lower Merion Township, Pennsylvania schools. Can you tell us the gist of your latest story?
This Lower Merion is an affluent suburb outside Philadelphia. It's considered, one of the most desirable school districts in the country. But right now, there's a big clash going on, and the heart of the issue is the question about technology in use in schools. Over 600 people have signed a petition saying that they want to preserve their right, if necessary, to opt their child out of digital devices in the classroom, because this is a school district where they start using iPads for the kids starting in kindergarten, Chromebooks in second grade, and every kid gets their own MacBook in eighth grade. And so all throughout K-12, these kids are on one-to-one devices. One-to-one being, kind of the jargony term for when every kid gets their own personal device. And a lot of the parents are getting really frustrated because they say that these devices are, kind of doing more harm than good and just distracting their kids. A lot of the things that they're used for in the younger grades are these sort of gamified edtech apps. And the parents don't feel like those are useful. So it's not that necessarily 600 parents are going to opt out, but they want to at least have the right to do so. I think because it puts a little pressure on the school system to change things.
Right.
And indeed, the school, to be fair to the school system, they've already started changing things, and they are in the midst of kind of the school board is trying to, rewrite its technology policies to, emphasize that they want minimal, screen use, especially in the younger grades, and, strengthening their cell phone policies to be a little bit stronger about making sure the kids don't have cell phones in class, things like that. And also, they've already improved their filtering system and blocked a lot of websites that parents have flagged as being harmful, because students were reporting, for example, that in school they were able to access games like Five Nights at Epstein's, which is where you pretend that you're on Epstein's island and you're trying to escape from the island. So obviously not appropriate for school. But also parents are complaining that, kids can get on Hulu, YouTube, etc. Like one high schooler told me she could openly be on Netflix in class, like she could get away with it. And so parents are just like, why are we letting our kids do this? Just take the laptop away,
And the story.
But the school district is arguing a lot of the curriculum is on computers now, and you can't just opt out of the curriculum. So they're kind of pushing back on this.
I'm just learning the names of some of the learning programs that people use. I know iReady and IXL. Do you happen to know what software? There's also Summit. Do you happen to know what software systems Lower Merion has been using?
Yeah, they use iReady. They just signed a contract for about $900,000 this March to use the iReady program for
Yeah,
K to 4 in math.
right,
Although that does include a component of digital textbooks too, so it's not entirely online.
right.
There's digital textbooks, there's physical manipulatives, but there's also a personalized learning platform, and also diagnostic testing 3 times a year that's
Right.
online.
Right.
Um,
Let me
and
let me ask a question if I
yeah.
can. Just for people who've been focusing on other things. This is all happening in the context of what I've been calling an ed tech backlash. Some people have been calling it an ed tech freakout. One quippy person on Twitter said this is education's anti-vax moment, which is probably more funny than accurate. But we're in a larger environment where people are having these concerns and reconsidering these things. And I just wanted to ask how you got on the story. You guys were working like mad to do the education scorecard story last week. If I were you, I would have gotten that story out, and then I would have said, "Hey, see you everyone. I'm on I'm on vacation for the rest of the week. But there you are, along with other people, on the story. And I'm just curious how the discussion went about, hey, we should do this story.
Yeah, the thing about this being the anti-vax movement is interesting because you are allowed to opt out of vaccines. So you are allowed to say, my child will not get a vaccine, even if that results in your child getting a disease that they spread to other children. But you're not allowed to say, I don't want my kid on an iPad, apparently. I mean,
Yeah.
It's an interesting
Yeah.
Comparison. But yes, how we decided to do the story. So yes, I had a very busy week. I got some overtime in, I will say that.
Yeah.
And originally, actually, my colleague, Jocelyn Gecker, was going to write the story. Unfortunately, she had some health issues that came up, so she wasn't able to write it. So since I had already interviewed several parents and I knew that this school board meeting was happening on Monday, May 11th, I was just like, you know what, I'll just go to the school board meeting and, write it up. And I'm really glad I did that. I think it was really important that I was able to be there in person because it really helped me to get perspectives that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Because, at the school board meeting, it was about the meeting was with the policy committee of the school board because they are doing a lot of, updates to their technology policy in response to parent concerns, which is fair. But also they wanted to repeal this policy that was passed like 16 years ago that parents were using to say that they have the right to opt out of digital devices entirely. And so the school board wants to repeal that. That policy, one of the reasons it was originally passed was because 16 years ago, there was a big lawsuit over allegations that they were spying on kids through the school webcams on the school laptops. So that's why it's kind of interesting that now, 16 years later, people rediscovered the policy, but rather than using it because of privacy concerns, they were much more concerned about their students, their children, accessing inappropriate websites and being distracted in class.
There's so many things I want to ask you, but let me circle back before we move on. What made it, when I think of the AP education team and the work that you all do, I think about big, beautiful stories. I don't necessarily think of breaking news or trend stories. If you don't mind taking me a little bit behind the scenes, what made this a AP education story rather than a local story or a national outlet sort of breaking news story? Like, how did you decide we want to get involved here?
Yeah, I think it's because it's part of this much wider national edtech backlash, as you've mentioned, right? If it was just one school district locally in Pennsylvania, that probably wouldn't be something our team would cover because we're a national outlet. But I really did think that it was representative of something that we're seeing nationwide. And so that's why I was interested in it. And I did like the fact that, this school board happens to be like a 15-minute drive from where I live. So I was like, okay, I can be there in person. I can actually go to this meeting, which is great. And also because it's like, I don't know, one day my kids could go to the school district. So I have a vested interest. But I think it was important because it did, we have been covering a lot of these issues of technology in the classroom and the impacts of it. I've personally been writing stories about AI surveillance in the classroom. And so it was very interesting to me because some parents were bringing up, we're really concerned that our kids are on inappropriate websites during class. And one of the suggested solutions was, well, we can put in the surveillance software so the teachers can watch their screens. And I'm like, that can lead to other issues down the line. So I think it's illustrating a wider national issue, but it was also the only school district where I've seen over 600 parents signed a petition about this, but it is happening across the country, most notably in Los Angeles Unified School District. They just had a huge change in policy where now they were going to go way less tech, whereas before they were kind of all in on tech. The superintendent was like really big on like, creating like an AI chatbot that students could use and things like that. So it's so interesting to see the pendulum really swing another way.
Let's go back a little bit to the idea of in-person reporting. A lot of people these days, understandably, cover school board meetings via live stream or replay. Some people now use AI to summarize a 6 or 8 or 10 hour meeting. What did you get? You mentioned this, but I'd love to hear a little bit more detail. What did you get from being there that you wouldn't have gotten by reading a transcript or watching a video?
Right. So the great thing that I got when I was there in person was that, even though there were over 100 parents there that were like overwhelmingly on kind of one side of the issue, I also got the other side of the issue because there were two high school students, Mia and Elliot, who showed up who said, look, this anti-tech backlash has already had an impact on us and an unintended consequence because, in like the past week, basically, the school had gotten way stricter on its filters on the school internet, and websites that they actually needed for class were being blocked. Like one girl was in, a global studies class, and she said like a lot of websites that have foreign domain names now blocked. These kids were in like the theater program, and like sometimes they have to use Pinterest just, for costume ideas, things like that. That gets blocked. So even things that seemingly don't seem like they have an academic purpose could still have a purpose. And these students, once they were done with their public comment, I ran out of the room after them and got them, got another interview with them. And, they shared with me, it's like, look, we are preparing for college. Like in college, we're going to have our own laptops, and no one's going to be looking over our shoulder. We need to learn how to deal with the distraction and use it responsibly. So they were in favor of, stronger screen restrictions for the youngest grades, but they said, look, by the time you're in high school, there does actually have to be like a technology component. That's what's going to prepare us for the real world. Right. So I thought it was super important and great to be able to get that perspective, which I totally wouldn't have. I could have seen their testimony, but I wouldn't have been able to catch up with them and interview them afterward.
Right. And your story had those interviews and images, and it added a layer of nuance and humanity, frankly. It wasn't just bad computers. On the issue of high schools and edtech, by the way, my understanding is that California is going to exempt high schools from some of its sort of tech or device legislation. So there is some attempt on school systems' part to differentiate whether you're talking about one-to-one or personal devices or screen time. Obviously, kids' needs are different at different ages.
Yeah. And every single parent that I talk to basically, really, really heavily emphasize, number one, they love the teachers in their district. They think they're really great teachers. They want their kids to have more interaction with their teachers, and that they're not anti-tech. They understand like kids need to learn about technology. They need to learn how to responsibly use computers, and they're not against like having a, computer lab or something. What they were against is like, that one-to-one policy where it's like every child gets their own personal computer that they're using, 70% or more of the day. Although it did vary a lot by school. Some parents said, in my school personally, it's not too much. Others said, even within the same district and within different classrooms, there can be variation of how much tech they use. But the parents were generally like, I just want this option to opt out if it gets to be too much. Or I just feel like this is doing more harm than good. Like one parent I talked to who said like, she was the one whose daughter was watching Netflix in class. She's like, why can't I just close the laptop? Like let's just take it away from her. And she was told that wasn't possible.
Right. The how difficult would it be for teachers in schools and districts to roll things back? I had a chance to interview the Kansas middle school principal who was in Natasha Singer's story. She's the principal who put the Chromebooks back in the carts, and she was able to do it without tremendous difficulty, without a horrible amount of pushback from the teachers and also or from the parents. Did you get a sense? I got the sense there was one little viral moment where one of the Lower Merion administrators or educators said, we can't go back. Did you get a sense that it would have been heroically, impossibly difficult for Lower Merion to roll things back as much as parents want?
I didn't get the sense that it would be, impossible, but it's definitely not something that can happen overnight. It's not something where they can just say, like, okay, I guess we're going back to worksheets and that's it. Because at this point, a lot of the curriculum is on online platforms. They've invested a lot of money in it. And if you, if you turn back overnight, the teachers would have to come up with, alternative lesson plans. That takes time. It's not impossible, but I definitely don't think it can happen immediately. It would need to be kind of planned out. One parent I talked to said, look, we acknowledge this would probably take 6 months to a year to implement properly, but you should still do it, right? And it also depends on the grade because, the school district says that in kindergarten, they do use the iPads, but it's only like 15 minutes a day. So it's like, okay, if it's only 15 minutes, not that hard to just find something else to do for 15 minutes. But you get up to the high school level, they're they're writing their essays online, they are taking notes, they're doing research projects. Like that would be more difficult, I think. And also, like, a lot of kids have lost the skills of
Right.
taking notes by hand.
Yeah.
I bet if you asked a bunch of students to write their essays by hand, the teacher would have a real hard time deciphering their handwriting.
Yeah.
So, like, you do need to reteach these skills. That it's not something that can happen with the snap of a finger. But it might end up happening anyway because, a huge issue right now is kids using AI to cheat. And at this point, the only solution that I see for that is just to have kids write the essays by hand. Like, I just don't see any other solution where you can guarantee that the students aren't cheating unless they just write it out,
Right.
So I kind of get the feeling most schools are going to realize eventually that's kind of where they have to go anyway.
Right. What was the experience for you? You do a lot of big national stories with data sets. In this story, you're doing interviews, you're doing old-fashioned field reporting. What was it like for you to be doing the old school version of journalism as opposed to the new school version?
I love it. It's my favorite thing is to be out there in person, especially when I get to interview students. That's my favorite thing about the job. And I set it as a personal goal for myself that I try and do that once a quarter, like do an actual in-person story, because my primary role is as a data journalist. So I spend a lot of time in front of a computer doing data analysis and looking at spreadsheets, which I also love. I love a good spreadsheet. But I always say that, data journalism is not about the numbers. It's about the people behind the numbers. If you don't actually talk to the people, you're not going to really understand what the data represents. And you're not going to understand everything that you're not seeing. You brought up earlier the importance of, being there in person. Like we are, I am working on tools for the AP that helps to use where, we're using AI to, help cover school board meetings and things like that. It's definitely hugely important. And I looked up a bunch of school board meetings that I had not, that had happened before I started this story. And it was hugely, helpful that they were online. And that definitely helped my story. But still being there in person was, important, especially because sometimes I would be watching a recording of a school board meeting, and it would start out with, someone saying, like, you may have just heard a conversation, that left you with some questions. And I was just like, wait, what just happened? And it's like, you could tell something controversial had happened before the meeting started and before they started hitting record. And you could tell there was like this tension in the air. And I was like, wait, what's going on here? And I had to talk to someone in the community to be like, what was up with that meeting? Like, what were they talking about right before that? And I discovered there had basically been like a big argument that broke out between school board members. And so it's like, okay, so that's why when I went to this meeting in person, I was like, I'm going to get there early
Right.
and make sure I'm there before the cameras start rolling.
So the missing conflict was a Lower Merion situation
Yeah.
before that. Oh, interesting.
Mhm.
So did you have a AI agent go through and look for previous mentions of screen times or opt-outs? Did you use AI for this story?
No, not for this particular story.
Got it. Because
We are working on tools that will be able to do that kind of thing, and we're hoping to be able to roll out those tools soon. I'm very excited about that. That going forward, but for this one,
right.
even with those tools, it's still better if you're there in person if you can be.
Yeah.
And it's also important because it helps you build the sources. Like there was other media there, mostly local media. But this meeting ran until I think past 11 p.m. So most of them left early. I didn't stay until the very end because I have a family, but I stayed pretty late, and I had some sources talk to me afterwards and say like, "Hey, we noticed you were the last one there. Like, we appreciate that."
Yeah.
So it helps to be there in person for them to actually see you.
Did you get a sense of, people keep asking me this, and I'm thinking that maybe you know the answer, where this backlash came from? Is there it's sort of like, I feel like we're sort of trying to find out where the fire started, if there was a big brush fire. Do you have a sense of, or is it well known, where did this start with one parent and one school and one classroom? Was there one particularly accidentally confrontational school board meeting? What's the genesis of this?
Yeah, so I think it started out during the pandemic, everything moved online. A lot of parents were very frustrated with remote learning online. They saw that learning entirely through the screens often is not very effective. They got a glimpse into their child's classroom that they didn't like. And then after, sort of the pandemic subsided, because, people had gotten used to everything being on a computer, it just kind of continued that way.
Right.
And parents were noticing more and more, just everything being online. Oh, sorry, you've disappeared.
Here I am. Sorry about that.
Should I start over again?
You were saying that after the pandemic, things just sort of continued the way they had been?
Yes. So after the pandemic, there was a lot more schools that just kind of continued doing everything online.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we were seeing these trends of increasing student mental health problems, increased loneliness, anxiety, depression in young people. We were seeing test scores plummeting.
Right.
The other story I did this week was about how we're in a reading recession with reading scores continuing to just slide every year.
Right.
And so parents were getting really frustrated with that. You had the anti-phone backlash where parents were, advocating for phone-free schools. You had books like The Anxious Generation and the work of Dr. Jared, let me make sure I have his name right.
Horvath, something Horvath.
I want to make sure. Yeah. So you had the work of Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath. Like his name came up like every 5 seconds with the parents I talked to. He's like, the authority with them. And so that was hugely influential. A lot of these parents, they started out with the cell phone ban advocacy groups like, there's Pennsylvania Unplugged, Delco Unplugged, Wait Until 8, etc. And then once they, were all kind of like in advocacy groups for that, they realized like, wait, it doesn't make sense that we're saying like ban the cell phones in schools when essentially kids are still walking around with a giant cell phone. Like one of the parents I talked to said, it doesn't matter if they ban the cell phone. Like she can go on Instagram on her school laptop. She can watch YouTube on her school laptop. It doesn't make a difference. Right. So they realized like it doesn't make sense for them to advocate for less screen time in, the form of cell phones if they're not also dealing with school laptops.
Right. What was the, I think that makes sense. I talked to the Wall Street Journal's Shalini Ramachandran about her YouTube in schools story from a couple weeks ago. And it sounded like there was you don't get rid of or if you don't address the in-school factor, cell phones alone isn't personal devices alone isn't enough. I'm
Yes,
curious.
many parents were talking about that specific article.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What response did the story get? You were operating in a really hectic media environment, right? There's the Inquirer's there, the Beacon has a reporter there. There are TV stations. Was it hard to stand out? Did the story get the attention that it deserved?
Yeah, I think it stood out. The Inquirer has done great work on this. Maddie Hanna is the reporter there. She did fantastic work, and that's how I found out about this happening in the first place, was that I was reading the Inquirer. And I think it's the kind of story that it's okay if there's a lot of outlets writing about it, because it deserves a lot of attention, and it's the kind of thing that gets people really fired up. We had like a little social video to go with it, and we got a lot of comments on that. It's
Yeah,
the
I
thing.
saw that.
Yeah, people really get passionate about this kind of thing. And so I think it got, a good, it got conversation going, which is great.
Yeah.
Haven't heard anything from the school district. They didn't want to talk to me,
Right.
and that's okay. But the parents that I talked to had good feedback, and they were grateful for the article being written.
Can we talk for a second about the social media clip? I've been fascinated by newsrooms and ed teams trying new things. And there you were talking straight to the camera, just like an influencer. And I wondered what it was like for you to be not just to be putting a microphone in front of somebody, or not taking footage on your phone or whatever, but to be the camera-facing person. What was it like for you, and did it seem to make a difference to AP readers?
Yeah, so that's another one of my professional goals for this year, was that I wanted to kind of push myself to try to learn more about social video, because again, I'm usually the one kind of just not on camera.
Yeah.
I'm the one dealing with the spreadsheets, not the one in the spotlight.
Right.
And so, but I realized like that's where a lot of people get their news. So I made it a goal at the beginning of the year that I would like try to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I was a little bit nervous, but it was good. It turned out to not be too difficult. I only had to take about like 5 minutes of footage total, because it's only a minute long video.
Right. Did you pitch it to them, or did they pitch it to you?
I pitched it because I figured I figured the meeting might get dramatic. So
did you pitch, or did anyone ask to do a social media video for the scorecard story, or was that just a big print collaboration?
That was more digital. I don't think we did a social video for that. I figured this would be good for social video because it's like I would be there on the scene. Like there was a specific event happening, right, where I could say like, I'm here in front of Lower Merion School District, right?
Right.
And so I think though, we had a training in our office about social video, and they were saying like, when is it good to do a social video? It doesn't make sense to do it for every story, but something where it's like either something that needs to be explained, or something where like you can be there. I will say there are reporters at the AP who don't want their face on camera because they have security concerns about that.
Right.
Unfortunately, there are people out there who really don't like the media, and putting your face out there publicly, like it is perceived by some people as dangerous.
Right.
And I think that's a completely valid concern to have. So I totally understand people who don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I personally felt like, since this is the way that, more and more people get their news, I think it is important to at least try it and see, what kind of reaction it gets, and see if it's something that I feel comfortable doing. And I think it's important to see if it can help build trust in news, to say like, you can put a face to the byline, and say like, this is a person who's there. I think it's also extremely important to like emphasize like we are there on the scene, because sometimes I hear things like people will say like, I don't get my news from media outlets anymore, I just get them from influencers. And I'm like, where do you think your influencers get their news?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, someone has to be, like, at the end of the day, no matter where you get your news, it starts with someone there gathering the information, being the reporter.
Right.
So people have to understand that it's like there is someone there who actually gathered the information first. Right? Like, they're not just like the secondhand influencers.
Right. And maybe we'd rather have journalists emulating influencers by doing camera-facing bits rather than influencers who may or may not have actually gone and listened to the meeting or read or interviewed, talking as if they had. That's my feeling, at least. I'd love it if more people did what you did. Was that your first? It came out great.
I did one like social video a couple years ago, which was a really fun video. It was about like math games you can play with preschoolers.
Right.
We got to visit a pre-K and like just play like games with adorable children. So that was a fun video to do.
Yeah. Two last questions, and thanks for doing this. You're one of the first people who's been a repeat guest on the Education Show. You were on with some of your other Ed Team colleagues a couple years ago around the Pulitzer recognition. So it's great to have you back. Thank you again for doing it. I talked to someone named Holly Corby, whose name you may or may not know. Knows a lot about education. And she said she was a little concerned, and I just love your thoughts on this, a little bit concerned about the possibility of sensationalistic coverage. It's people that feel very strongly about technology right now. Passions are high. Do you think there's a danger of media coverage either making edtech overly responsible for things that it may or may not be responsible for, or of making the backlash seem bigger than it is? Do you think there's how do you combat against flattening the story or amplifying its prevalence?
Well, I think that's why it's so important to actually get the voices of the students who are impacted. A really great thing about this meeting is that like a ton of the people who came to speak at the meeting were children, like literally as young as first grade. There were there was a first grader giving public comment. It was like adorable, all the way up to high school. And I interviewed 3 high schoolers, and 2 of them, as I mentioned, had the view of like, look, we need technology to prepare us for college. And one had a view of like, I am seeing my classmates' minds deteriorate like before my eyes because they're using AI to cheat on everything. And this laptop is just a cheating and distraction machine. And so I got 2, like very different perspectives. And I think that helped present the story in a very balanced way. I think it's something that does deserve a lot of coverage because it is very, very worrisome to me when I hear about schools where like kids can get away with openly watching Netflix, Hulu in class, where they're on screens all day. I think that is a cause for concern. And it is something that like, you can write about and say this is a real concern without being sensationalistic about it. By really, just talking to the people who are most directly affected. And honestly, I have to say, even though there was, some tension at this meeting, I felt like the people on all sides agreed on like 95% of stuff. Like they basically agreed, like we should have like minimal screen time for the younger grades. And everybody agrees that like, you still have to teach kids about technology. Like you still have to have your typing classes, your computer classes, etc. Like obviously they have to learn those skills. But the disagreement was sort of like in that remaining 5%, which is a very important 5%, where, some kids, some parents are just like, I don't want my kindergartner on an iPad for even 15 minutes a day, because I'm trying to get them to be not addicted to screens. And the second you give them any iPad time, that's it. Like they're just, they don't want to go outside and play in recess anymore. Right.
Right.
But I think there's actually a lot of room for agreement.
Right. Yeah. And coverage that has that kind of context, both the varying opinions, but also the including the overlap, the areas of agreement. That's not sexy journalism, but it's important to say.
And I will also say I do think it was important that I was there in person and that I understood some of the local context, like the history of the school district and, controversies that it had in the past. Unfortunately, the AP this month did offer buyouts slash layoffs to much of its U.S. news staff in an effort to sort of restructure the company and change the direction to be less focused on newspapers, more on digital. And I understand the need to, change direction because of changing times. But I also think, like, at the end of the day, like, you just need the person there who can actually see things in person, who understands the local context, who has the experience. And there needs to be less of a focus on, are they digital, print, text, video, audio, and more like, are they the right person who can just be there and talk to people, right? Like, I'm a data person. That's not who you would really expect to be at the school board meeting. But because I was here, I was like, I should do it,
Yeah, and we're glad you did. I'm sorry to hear about the buyout offer. Does that affect the ed team, or is the ed team protected because of the foundation support?
It did not affect the ed team.
I hate to say it, but that's all I care about. I'm so glad everyone's going to be okay. What's next for you or Lower Merion on this story? Do you think you'll ever cover it again? Do you think that Lower Merion's going to go down a giant edtech sinkhole, or do you think that this was the height of the conflict?
I'm going to keep on keeping tabs on it. Again, since we have like a national focus, I don't think I can like do a Lower Merion story every week. But I'm going to keep tabs on it. I'm going to see what's going to happen and see whether this, like the school board and the parents come to some kind of compromise, or whether the tension escalates and, there becomes more, conflict between the parties.
Right. And also we can see whether it spreads to other places or not. That's going to be the important thing.
I mean, I think at this point it already has. It didn't start in Lower Merion, like it's started, I think, independently in a lot of different places around the country. Yeah.
So maybe we'll see more. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your process and sharing your reflections. It's really extraordinarily helpful. And if people haven't gone and read the story or watched the social video, for those of us with attention problems, I would encourage you all to do that. Sharon Luria from the Associated Press, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I'll mention that, my colleague Jocelyn has already, been working on another story related to, edtech opt-outs, focusing specifically on LAUSD. She's based in California. That's a fantastic story. So keep an eye out on that for that too.
That's coming soon, I hope.
It may have already been published. I got to double check on that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.